This happened a long time ago, but I remember the moment like it was yesterday. I was 22, still finding my footing, working temp jobs after college and trying to figure out if I had any real place in the world of politics. My cousin Louis was the golden child of the family. Everyone knew he'd run for office someday. Hell, half the family talked about it like it was his birthright. It was late spring in Savannah, Georgia, and I got dragged to this big political fundraiser at the Savannah Yacht Club. I wasn't supposed to be there. My Aunt Louis's mom invited me at the last minute because she felt bad that my internship in DC had fallen through. She thought getting me in the room might lift my spirits. Looking back, I don't think she even realized what that night would do to me. The place smelled like old money whiskey, leather chairs, perfume that cost more than my car. I wore my best blazer, which still had the department store tag stitched on the sleeve. I looked young and out of place. Nobody noticed me and I tried to stay out of the way, mostly hanging by the windows and sipping ginger ale from a plastic cup. Louis, though? Louis lit up the whole damn room. He walked in like he owned it. Handshakes flying, people laughing at things he hadn't even finished saying. I watched him charm a senator, joke with a state judge, and introduce himself to 3 different CEOs. He had that kind of smile that made people feel like they were already in on the joke. Then it happened. He was standing in the center of a circle of rich donors and local big shots. Somebody handed him a fresh glass of red wine. He raised it high and scanned the room. His eyes landed on me. And then he said it. "Here's to dreamers," he paused, still looking right at me. "They keep the leaders entertained." Everyone laughed. Loud. Too loud. I smiled and raised my glass like I was in on it, but inside something twisted. The laughter didn't hurt. The look in his eyes did. He wasn't just making a joke. He was making a point. He wanted me to know my place. That's the moment I decided I'd burn everything he cared about to the ground. From that night on, I started watching everything he did. I went home and wrote down his exact words. I started a journal I kept hidden in a box under my bed. The first line I wrote was, "Make Louis remember this toast." I didn't even know how I'd do it yet. I just knew I would. It would take time, but I had time. He had the head start, but I had the hunger. So I started climbing. I'll tell you how. Just know this: it took me 19 years. And by the time I was done, Louis's name was ruined. His family name too. His kids, his grandkids, they still won't say it in public. And it all started with that smug little toast. After that night, I stopped trying to impress my family. I moved back to Atlanta and started building a real plan. I worked office jobs during the day, and at night I volunteered for local campaigns. I didn't care who the candidate was. Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter. I wasn't there to make friends or push agendas. I was there to learn. Every job, every campaign, I took mental notes. Who had power? Who held grudges? Who wanted favors? Louis went on to law school. He married a girl from Charleston whose father had connections all over the Southeast. By the time he was 30, he'd already won a seat in the Georgia State House. Family bragged about him every holiday. They'd bring up his speeches, his TV interviews, the way he looked so presidential. They never asked about me, but I was there behind the scenes. When I hit 30, I was running logistics for a U.S. Senate campaign. 4 years later, I was managing field strategy for a governor's race. I got good at making people owe me. Real good. I learned how to dig without making noise. You'd be amazed what's buried in small-town clerk offices or forgotten in old campaign finance reports. Louis didn't notice me, not really. He'd shake my hand at family weddings, call me cousin like we were still 12. I pretended to smile. I never corrected him. He thought I was harmless. That was my biggest weapon. Then one year, I ran into a guy named Curtis Jameson, Louis's old campaign manager from his first race. Curtis had moved on to bigger things, but when he saw me at a fundraiser in Macon, he raised an eyebrow. "You're Louis's cousin, right?" I nodded. He laughed into his drink. "Did he ever tell you how we paid off that union guy back in '07? Whole thing nearly blew up the campaign." I played dumb, but my ears burned. "What union guy?" Curtis smiled and shook his head. "Ah, never mind. Ancient history." I didn't let it go. Over the next 6 months, I tracked down every person who ever worked for Louis. Old staffers, volunteers, even a former mistress who lived in Athens. I found financial reports with missing invoices. I found shady land deals tied to a real estate LLC owned by his college roommate. I found enough threads to stitch together a full quilt of quiet corruption. But I didn't strike yet. Not until I had something that would stick. Then came the big announcement. Lewis was running for U.S. Congress. It was all over the news. The family was buzzing. My aunt called me for the first time in years just to say how proud she was. I congratulated her politely, told her he had my support. She believed me. What she didn't know was that I'd already met with his opponent. Her name was Myra Collins. Ex-military. Sharp as a blade. Clean record. She didn't have the money or the name recognition, but she had fight. And I had what she needed, dirt. I met her behind a gas station diner off I-75. Just us, 2 coffees and a file folder thick with proof. She flipped through it page by page, then looked up. "Why are you doing this?" I stared her in the eyes. "Because 18 years ago, he made a toast at my expense. I'm just returning the favor." She didn't get it, not really. But she nodded. She took the folder. The campaign got brutal after that. Headlines. Leaks. Unanswered questions. Suddenly Lewis was on defense. His tone changed. He stopped smiling in interviews. He stopped cracking jokes. And he still had no idea who was behind it. Not yet. As soon as the leaks started hitting the press, I knew I had to go completely dark. No more attending fundraisers, no showing up at political events where I might run into family. I even skipped my own brother's wedding, just so I wouldn't risk being seen. Myra Collins surged in the polls. What was supposed to be an easy win for Lewis turned into a nail-biter. Every week, new questions popped up about donations he'd received, contractors he'd hired, favors he'd handed out while serving in the State House. And every time someone on his team scrambled to clean it up, I fed Myra's people more. But then something happened that even I didn't plan for. A former staffer of Lewis's, somebody I'd never even spoken to, went public. She filed a complaint about a closed-door meeting from years ago, back when Lewis helped fast-track a zoning law that ended up benefiting a company partially owned by his father-in-law. She said she'd tried to speak up at the time but was pressured to stay quiet. The story exploded. Now it wasn't just corruption. It was cover-up. And it wasn't just whispers in campaign ads anymore, it was being shouted on live TV. Lewis's wife, Meredith, took their 3 kids and left their house in Savannah. Rumor was she moved back in with her parents in Charleston. His name started getting dropped from event lineups. The donors pulled out one by one. Still, he didn't drop out. And still, he didn't know it was me. I stayed patient. I wanted to be the last face he saw before it all came crashing down. 2 weeks before the election, Lewis held a rally in Augusta. It was supposed to be a show of strength. He hired a PR firm to clean up his image, brought in a few big names to speak. The cameras were rolling. His voice was strong. He was trying to look confident. That's when I walked in. I didn't try to hide. I stood in the back in full view, just where he'd be able to see me once his eyes scanned the crowd. I wore a plain blue blazer, no name tag, no press pass. Just standing there, arms crossed. And when he saw me, he paused. Just for half a second. But I saw it. The flicker. The flash of recognition. The question in his eyes. That night, he made a statement to the press about a growing smear campaign led by bitter political operatives with personal agendas. He knew. But it was too late. Myra had saved the last file I gave her for the final week. A full breakdown of how Lewis used campaign funds to pay for private expenses, meals, travel, even a hotel bill from a weekend getaway with someone who wasn't his wife. There was proof, receipts, dates, emails. She didn't even have to say his name. The story spoke for itself. The race ended in a landslide. Lewis lost. Badly. But the worst part wasn't losing the race. It was what came next. After the election, Lewis disappeared from public view. He gave a short, half-hearted concession speech from a hotel conference room with maybe 20 people in it. His voice cracked halfway through. No press. No family in sight. He didn't thank his team. He didn't look up once. I watched the whole thing online. Alone in my apartment, sitting on the floor with a drink in my hand. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel relief. I just felt finished. But the fire didn't go out right away. 2 weeks later, his old campaign treasurer was arrested. Charges included wire fraud, misuse of public funds, and obstruction. The state launched an official ethics investigation. They called Lewis in. Cameras swarmed the courthouse steps. He looked thinner. He didn't smile. By spring, the verdict was clear. While he wasn't jailed, he was fined, barred from holding any public office again, and stripped of key licenses. Every endorsement he ever got? Pulled. His name was a stain now. Then the real fallout began. His estate in Bluffton, the one he inherited from his grandfather, was sold to pay legal fees. The golf club dropped his membership. His wife filed for divorce and kept the kids. His college alma mater removed his plaque from the alumni wall. The family stopped saying his name at gatherings. His mother moved to a smaller house and refused to talk about what happened. I heard from a cousin that Lewis tried moving to Asheville to start fresh. But even there, people recognized him. I never reached out. Never gloated. Never showed up to rub salt in the wound. But he knew. And I think that was the worst part for him. A year later, I was back in Savannah for a friend's wedding. I stopped at the same country club where it all began. They'd remodeled the ballroom, but I remembered the corner where I stood that night where he toasted me in front of that crowd. Here's to dreamers. I whispered the words to myself and smiled. But I'll be honest with you. That smile didn't last. You see, I spent 19 years chasing this. 19 years building alliances, sacrificing normal life, letting go of relationships, all for one man's fall. I watched friends get married, start families, move on. I stayed in the game. I kept my hands dirty. I became cold, quiet, strategic. And I don't regret it. Not exactly. But I do wonder sometimes if I had let it go that night. If I had just laughed it off and walked away, what might my life have looked like? Because now, with him gone and disgraced, and me standing at the top of the mountain I built from his ruins, there's nothing left to climb. And it's lonely up here.